Now, our next guest is Angelo Giuliano. He's an Italian who's spent the last 27 years in China. He is a substantial political and financial analyst. I think this is the first time that we've met. So let me just say, Mr. Giuliano, a very big welcome to the mother of all talk shows. First of all, give us some background. How did an Italian end up in China 27 years ago?
Well, George, adventure. I already predicted the rise of China. It was emerging. I had learned that in '79, Deng Xiaoping said he had this policy of opening up and reform of China, and he started from a small village, Shenzhen. The village was 100,000 inhabitants. Now it's a very dynamic city of 10 million inhabitants. So I foresaw that, and my decision was to leave my cocoon. I was working in the banking industry in Switzerland, and I wanted adventure. So I went to Taiwan, and I lived in Taiwan 18 months, and I learned Chinese. I started learning Chinese. So it's been 27 years. I've seen the changes, all the major changes from Taiwan side to the mainland side. It was just amazing. I came to China. I had different phases. At the beginning, you know nothing. Then after 1 year, you think you know something. After 27 years, you become humble. You become humble because China is another world. If you want to be objective about China, you need to look at China with Chinese eyes. So this is why we have there's lots of bias, a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to China, because we assume we are looking with the Western eyes, and it's completely wrong. We need to stop this arrogance, which is very imperialistic arrogance. It's the same as when we used to go to South America and we want to colonize people, and then we were bringing civilization. This is the same we're doing with China. China is its own agenda. It's never been hegemonic. It's focusing on prosperity of its own people, and actually the CPC has been delivering over the last 40 years. We have 800 million people that were lifted out of poverty, and through the 27 years, I saw the changes. It is just amazing. It's just amazing. I saw, I used to go to villages, in small villages, they were walking bare feet. I'm talking about very, very small villages. Their dreams was to have electricity, to have, just basic stuff. Now you go back to China. Your first experience when you land in Shanghai, in Pudong Airport, will be like an extremely modern airport. You will take a fast train of 400 kilometers per hour to the center. And you will see the most modern city. So you see, my frustration now is, why am I coming out and speaking out? Is because there are lots of self-proclaimed experts out there, and they're picturing something about China which is completely wrong. And I think we need to pay attention to this critical moment. It's this, what we call the Thucydides trap, where you have this emerging power, which is not hegemonic. If people were to learn about Chinese history, China has never been hegemonic. China, they used to have when Christopher Colombo discovered America, China had a fleet which was probably 20, 30 times bigger than the second largest, the largest fleet in Europe. What they did was not conquer the world. They started planting stations, trading stations all around Asia, in Africa, and in India, because they wanted to trade. They were focusing on trading, mutual prosperity. And when you look at the project that China is actually building, like the Belt and Road Initiative, it's very visionary. It's about they have ambition not only for China but for the world, and what they want is this multipolar world where actually where you all the global South will have a voice. it is a new world. It's very exciting. There's a new world which is being built right now of end of imperialistic hegemony of the Western world, and we are going to give back dignity to the global South, and maybe we are going to really look at common prosperity. Put the people first, and again, it's not about slogans. China are not talking about slogans. They're making plans. They have 5 years plan, 10 years plan, 50 years plans. While when you look at the West, we are planning from one election to another. It's a vicious circle of electing and regretting. We need to look at our own problems first. We are actually trying to impose what we self-proclaim ourselves to be the democracy. We are not democracy. This is a complete joke. When you ask a Chinese about democracy, they consider themselves to have 90% of people in China consider them to have a good democracy. Now ask the same question in the arrogant collective West, any country. You see, what my frustration is that we don't even know ourselves, our own system, and we want to impose and go to China and teach them about their system, which is, by the way, it's a system of meritocracy. It's a system that actually was applied 2,000 years ago. What the CPC is doing is it's actually learning from its own history and picking up from all the mistakes that other countries did and finding the best model for themselves.
Well, in the West, we can change the party, but we cannot change the policies. In China, you cannot change the party, but you can change the policies. And you were there at the birth of the biggest change of all, from the period of what we might call late Maoism to early Deng Xiaoping-ism and this opening up, as you described it. There's a pretty dramatic change in system, in basic policy, which we could never have in the West. Our orthodoxy, which is policed vigorously by all means, accepts only different shades of the same economic and foreign policy attitudes, whichever party is in power.
You say that absolutely right. We have a huge deficit of democracy in the West. Actually, if you were to ask average Joe in the West about basic understanding of what it means to have a democracy, people cannot even actually distinguish what is the difference between electing and voting. Just basic understanding of democracy. Now there are preconditions to have a democracy. Number one, it's having a sovereignty. You don't have a sovereignty, you don't have democracy. You should have biased media. Media should be neutral. They shouldn't be in the hand of oligarch. You should have a certain level of education. You need a stable society to have democracy. If it's unstable, you cannot have a democracy. Maybe you need a certain level of development. Now China has learned through its own experience, and they have a system that they're extremely happy with. I think the problem you had, and actually it's interesting, you just mentioned this before, actually the policies change in China. It's interesting, they have a system in China. You see, in the West, we complain and we go in the street because there's a problem. In China, they anticipate that. They have tens of thousands of surveys all year round. They're looking at what the people need. So they're extremely close to the population. And so there's no problem, because when they anticipate that problem, they are going to find solutions. They are servant of the people. You see, the same as policemen. You would never see a policeman beating a person in the street because they're there to serve you. Why would they beat you if they're supposed to serve you? But those are small differences. Then I'm not saying, I'm not saying that I like everything. But again, Chinese are happy with that system. And it is bringing tangible things. That's the difference. You see, in the West, we are selling freedom and democracy. I mean, as if we could eat freedom and democracy. China, they're very pragmatic. They look at progress in societies in terms of longevity. Is this system bringing me universal health care? Am I going to live longer? Do have access to food, education, tangible stuff? In the West, you can die in the streets, you're homeless, but then it's okay. You have the right to vote for two people that we selected on the first place. Because you see, those candidates that we won't vote for in the West, they were selected before that. And they're not obeying to who votes for them, they obey to who is funding them.
You know, I used to say the kind of things that you just said 50 years ago. But here's the point. Maybe you've been away too long. It's not just that you can't eat freedom and democracy. It's that the very freedom that we used to sing about is being taken away from us piece by piece, sometimes large piece by piece. So the things that we used to be our shtick, we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of assembly and protest and freedom to write and say what we like. All of these things are being taken away from us, Angelo. The fact is, I'll end up, at the moment I'm speaking to you on all platforms, but there's no guarantee that 6 weeks from now, I'll not be speaking to you only on Telegram. The right to speak, the right to hear alternative points of view is being comprehensively removed from our people in Western countries, your former country and mine.
No, absolutely. I just wish that people were to learn at least history. You see, they cherish democracy, and what they mentioned the French Revolution. Do people know about the French Revolution? You know, the people that actually went into the street, they went not because of democracy. They went into the street because they wanted bread. It was the price of bread that was too high. And ultimately, they were pawns. They were used by the bourgeoisie, the coming rich, the new elites, because they wanted to share the power with the king, take away the power from the king. So you see, basic understanding of history, people just don't have it. They have an understanding that actually comes from Hollywood, you know. So my frustration is all those, because I have a first experience in attempt of color revolution. Especially, I was in Hong Kong in 2019. I've seen people coming in the streets, you know, manipulated. They were financed by National Endowment for Democracy. They were like, they wanted freedom, democracy, and so on. And it's just a manipulation. You see, we have idealized all democracies, which are actually a system to divide, to better control people. The more you give the impression to people that there are two camps that are antagonizing each other, the more you give them the illusion of democracy. This is why you see people in the US, for example, they're fighting against racist BLM, abortion, you know, societal things, you know, easy to divide people. But at the end of the day, it's just a system of control, because ultimately, you know what? Is it going to change anything if it's Democrats or Republicans? Those people are laughing. They're laughing because they see two sides being fighting each other, and they're laughing. And what the US is applying internally, they're applying to Taiwan. They're applying that to Ukraine. You see, they are fighting Russia to the last Ukrainian. If not enough, they are going to fight Russia to the last European. What are they going to do in Taiwan? They're going to fight China to the last Taiwanese. If not enough, to the last Japanese. and ultimately it's going to be a containment. Actually, just so this is a divide and conquer. And what saddens me is that people just don't learn from history. Again, if they were to learn just the World War II, if people were just to learn about World War II, how did it happen? How Hitler came to power? Who did finance Hitler at the beginning? Who transferred the technology for him to have that army, so powerful army? Who was that? People don't remember that 20,000 people in Madison Square, they had Nazi symbols and they were pro-Hitler. The US before World War II first of all, was anti-communist. We propped up Hitler. And then when Hitler was about to win, we started financing land and lease agreement with USSR. You see, this is a repeating history. We're making again the same mistake and we're being fooled. And they're applying. What are they applying now with Ukraine? The same. Land lease agreement. What are they going to apply to Taiwan? Same. And ultimately, the US, what did they do? World War II. They came in the war at the end when everything was over. They didn't suffer the war. World War II was all Europe destroyed, Asia destroyed, and the US came up with 75% of world GDP. They had over 50% of gold reserves after World War II. You see, they're hoping to replicate what they did in World War II. And ultimately, what they do after the war, you come in and you do nice movies and you're going to brainwash people for 50, 60 years. We were the one that liberated the world from Nazis. It is not true. Russia did it. Russia did it. And again, what frustrates me now more than ever is that we are funding Nazis in Ukraine against the people that actually saved us from Nazis. It's disgusting. I wish I didn't have to do what I'm doing now, because it's not making my life better. And I know, and I have huge respect. You are an inspiration, George. But I don't, I wish I had a normal life. It's frustrates me. I'm doing this, coming to your show, because journalists are not doing their job. And because I'm inspired by what you do, George. If you weren't there, who would do that? So, but it's, again, we have a voice, but, they are going to show, they're going to make it legal. It's one thing that they cut us from social media, and they do that. They manipulate algorithms and so on. But ultimately, very soon, they are going to put us in jail for that.
Yeah, well, Julian Assange is already, of course, in jail. The criminals have made it a crime to report on the crimes they commit. That's the Alice in Wonderland that we are now in. Just in saying goodnight to you, let me recall my late and great friend, the best prime minister we never had, the late Mr. Anthony Wedgwood Benn, once asked the legendary Chinese foreign minister Zhou Enlai in the 1970s what he thought the lasting impact of the French Revolution had been. And Zhou Enlai took a long drag on his cigarette and answered, "It's far too early to say." So China plays a long game. Angelo, thank you very much indeed. A delight to meet you and have you on the mother of all talk shows.